In this test, I'll be testing 6 of the most popular all-season tyres on the market and comparing them to a summer and winter tyre to find out exactly what's best for your driving needs. So how does this test differ from the all-season tyre test I published in March? Well, firstly, we're testing in 19-inch on a performance car, this Golf GTI, as opposed to 16-inch on a normal Golf. So it'll be really interesting to see whether the order of the tyres will remain the same at 16 and 19 inches. Secondly, and I think this is even more important, I'm going to be digging into these and comparing them to an ultra high performance summer tyre. People are starting to fit all season tyres on their performance vehicles, and I'm wondering whether the increase in performance in the winter is actually worth the offset of the decrease in performance of the summer. So that's going to be super interesting. And finally this year, I have 6 ultra high performance winter tyres in the same size, which I've bundled up in the same test. So during the video, I'll not only be talking about how the all season tyres compare to a summer tyre, but how they compare to the best of the ultra high performance winter tyre. It's going to be a really interesting test. Once this is done and the winter test, which will be out in a few weeks, I'll make a third piece of content comparing all the tyres in one big picture so you'll really understand the differences. But for now, let's get on with the testing. Snow handling. How do these 6 all-season tyres perform in the snow, especially compared to the summer tyre? Now I'm going to try and go over this pretty quickly because I don't think snow handling is the most important quality for an all-season tyre, although some do. Because I think as long as an all-season tyre is drastically better than a summer tyre, you're winning. Because if you want something that's really good in snow, just buy a winter tyre, right? You know, one tyre can't really do everything perfectly well, and an all-season tyre is just trying to be the best blend for all conditions, for climates that don't see a lot of snow. And the good news is all of them were drastically better than the summer tyre, but it wasn't a small margin, it was massive. The slowest around the track were the Bridgestone and the Bridgestone. Now both of these just lacked a little bit of front end bite, and the Bridgestone was, I guess it was just a softer feeling tyre, which was kind of appreciated on this semi-bumpy track, but it wasn't the quickest around the lap, but both of them, as I've said, were miles better than the summer tyre. Good job, guys. Then it was the budget tyre. Got nothing bad to report on that. Good tyre. And then you started stepping up to the tyres which had like good grip, almost winter quality grip. It was the Continental. Now the Continental had excellent front end bite. I guess I would just want a tiny bit more feedback at the very limit, but it's a really good tyre compared to the summer tyre and even compared to the other two. Then there was the Pirelli. Now, what we've seen before in my test, the Pirelli is excellent in snow handling because it really likes to turn and it likes to come out the corners. It does transient things really, really well. So you can turn in on the brakes, and you can accelerate coming out of the corners just a little bit earlier. That's what I like about the Pirelli. It feels a little bit more sporty. And then finally, I'm bored of saying this, you're bored of hearing this, the Michelin Cross Climate 2 was just incredible in the snow. It was another half second or so on from the Pirelli and felt essentially like a winter tyre. Speaking of which, I've run, as I said in the intro, I've run a winter test at the same time with this, and if the Michelin was in the winter test, which I'll do a separate video on, I promise, this year, it would have beaten some of the winter tyres. It was that fast round the lap, but it just didn't feel quite as precise. As for the summer tyre, well, the summer tyre you could get going. Like, this is a Pirelli P0 PZ4, it's an ultra high performance summer tyre and this is hard packed snow. But you could still, with time, this is very flat, pick up some speed, and I did an absolutely hero lap, but it was still almost twice as slow as even the worst all-season tyre. And the biggest problem was you'd get to a corner and you'd tap the brakes and you would just sail off into the sunset. Like you'd forget how bad it was because you'd spent so long and been so graceful picking up acceleration with the summer tyre. In fact, on the way back from doing traction and braking testing, the summer tyre failed to get up the smallest of hills. Had to reverse all the way back and then have a massive run up, which is something you don't want to be doing on the road.
The snow traction test almost mirrored snow handling, with the Michelin once again the best and Pirelli a close second. In both snow traction and snow braking, the best winter tyre was a good step on from the best all-season tyre, with the average of the winter tyres being better than all but one of the all-season tyres. These are the conditions the winter tyres should be excelling in. Surprisingly, ice traction had the budget all-season tyre leading the way, even matching the best of the winter tyres. Pirelli and Michelin were once again very strong, and naturally the summer tyre was awful. Lastly, ice braking once again had the budget all-season tyre at the front of the group. This is something we'll discuss more later in the video. For now, let's see how the tyres perform in the wet.
These all-season tyres in the wet have proven to be quite an interesting bunch. Firstly, I think I found my new favourite worst tyre ever. With the budget all-season, over 20 seconds a lap slower. 20 seconds a lap, and this is a long lap, but it's still inexcusable. You just felt like you were smearing around the track. People just, I say it every time, but again, please don't buy cheap tyres. I don't care about you, but think about everyone else around you. That's just, it's not fair to risk people like that. Anyway, next up, vastly ahead of the cheap tyre, but still 5 seconds behind the best, which is about 5% around here, is the Michelin Cross Climate 2. Now, if you're a regular viewer of the channel, you'll know my thoughts on the Cross Climate 2 in the wet. I'm not going to say a whole lot more. Michelin know it needs to be improved. I am confident that the replacement for the Cross Climate 2 will have vastly improved wet performance, so hopefully that's arriving soon. As for the top four, these were all excellent tyres, and they were separated by the tiniest of margins. Fourth to second was separated by a 1/10 of a second. It's that close. A 1/10 of a second over such a long lap is nuts, and 4 different tyres. It was Bridgestone, Pirelli and Bridgestone, fourth, third and second. Now of the three, the Bridgestone was probably my favourite to drive. Again, small margin, but it just felt, it just worked really well with this GTI. It was rounded, like it was positive on the front end. You could trust it to do exactly what you wanted it to do. There was no surprises, and I gelled with that tyre and car combination more than the others, although again, it's super close. The Pirelli was probably the closest of the rest of the Bridgestone, and I'd say the only difference between the Bridgestone and the Pirelli, and it did cost the Pirelli a little bit of lap time, was I think the Pirelli probably had slightly higher peak grip, but when it was sliding, it just took a little bit longer to recover. Again, I'm talking about the tiniest of margins. Both these tyres were excellent. And then there was the Bridgestone, which was a little bit softer in like steering response and handling, but the grip levels, you just couldn't argue with the grip levels. They were monumental. So excellent job from those three tyres. And then even more an excellent job, once again, like in my test earlier this year, the Continental All-Season Contact 2, the new product from Continental, was the fastest around the wet. Again, just buckets of grip. Not quite as sporty and as direct as the Bridgestone and Pirelli, but a very good tyre. As for the summer and winter tyres, well, this was a little bit more interesting. The summer tyre, as expected, trounced all the all-season tyres in steering response, in feedback, in aquaplaning performance over the deep puddles. It just felt so much sharper. I felt like the Bridgestone and Pirelli were the closest, but there was still a gap both in subjective handling and in lap time. Now the winter tyres were interesting. They're all ultra high performance winter products, whereas these are just sort of what you call touring all-season products, which meant the fastest winter tyre around the lap was faster than the fastest all-season tyre, and the dynamics of them got pretty close, but under braking you could definitely feel the extra sight movement. You'd be happy with any of the top 4 all-season tyres in handling, so let's see how they compare in braking and aquaplaning.
Testing at an unusually warm temperature, the all-season tyres were way ahead of the winter tyres in wet braking, with the Pirelli and Bridgestone again the best, but the summer tyre was better than everyone. We did also test wet braking in a cooler temperature, around 7 degrees centigrade. This time the summer tyre dropped to 3rd place and the winter tyres closed in a little on the all-season tyres. The Pirelli was the best in the deeper water or straight aquaplaning, but 1st to 4th places were very close, and you can find the curved aquaplaning data on tyrereviews.com. Moving on to dry braking, the Pirelli, Michelin and Bridgestone all performed very well, but was still behind the summer tyre, and the budget all-season tyre performed even worse than the average of the winter tyres. Now let's check out dry handling.
All-season tyres, well this has actually proven pretty interestingly. As always, dry handling perhaps isn't the most relevant thing, but we also do things like lane changes, quick reactions, how the steering torque ramps up, everything that makes your day-to-day life with tyres more livable and more enjoyable. So while I'm talking also about lap time, bear in mind I'm scoring them heavily on how you would find them on the road. Now to keep things short, the budget tyre was bad at both the things, lap times and steering reactions, although it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. The biggest problem with the budget during the lane changes was a really imprecise rear end, so you'd quickly adjust things and then the car would oversteer and it was just very unstable, and that's not something you want on the road. Next up was Michelin and Bridgestone. Now the Michelin, as always, felt very nice sub-limit, so like cruising around, but as you pushed on and tried to do a lap time, the Michelin really grumbled about wanting to go, like you wanting to go fast, and Michelin was like, nah, I don't think so, I'm just going to understeer. And that's a common theme with the Cross Climate 2. Perhaps it won't affect you, but that's how it was on track. The Bridgestone was probably the least precise of the non-budget tyres. It was just soft steering, but the grip was fine, so it was a good tyre around the lap. The Continental, now this was kind of in its own little segment in time, although the time differences are very small, and in terms of steering reactions, it had a bit of a bigger dead spot in the middle, which made it feel very relaxed. And over the bumps on the track, of which there are many, it was probably the least upset, which I really appreciated. So that's probably a nice quality for the road. And if you're not looking for a sporty all-season tyre, it's a great tyre because the grip was excellent. Next up was the Pirelli. Now this was the first of the tyres that you felt like you were getting quite close, surprisingly close to the summer tyre, because you could really attack the surface. And where the other tyres were washing wide with understeer mid-corner, the Pirelli was tucking, and then you could get on the throttle a lot earlier. And although the differences in times, it might only be half a second or 3/4 of a second, it really was quite noticeable subjectively. I was like, oh, this must be the best tyre. I didn't know what it was. It was towards the end of the set. I was like, I don't think anything's going to get any closer. And then the next tyre turned out to be the Bridgestone, which did get closer. That did feel a little bit more like the Conti in that it was quite relaxed around centre, but once it was loaded up, it did have a little bit more grip than the Pirelli, but both those tyres were absolutely excellent. The summer tyre, well, the summer tyre obviously was the fastest, but not quite as fast as I imagined. I thought it was probably going to be over this 90-second lap nearly. I thought it'd be like 6 or 7 seconds, but compared to the best all-season tyres, there isn't, so that's super impressive. However, you just like the braking reaction was so much quicker, so it doesn't have the sipes moving. The steering reaction mid-corner, you could just take more liberties, and it just felt very tight. And this is obviously an ultra high performance summer tyre. And then the best of the winter tyres was around a mid-pack all-season tyre, and these are ultra high performance winter tyres. So even though they're ultra high performance winter tyres and these all-season tyres are very much touring all-season tyres, the disadvantages of a winter tyre in the dry is too much to overcome. So that's how they all did in handling and subjective handling. Let's go look at the rest of the test. Okay, so what's left to talk about? Noise and comfort was closer than ever, no doubt made worse by the fact I picked a 19-inch low-profile tyre size. We did have some bad weather on the subjective noise and comfort day, which meant I can only give you the external noise data, where the Michelin had the tiniest advantage over the Bridgestone and the budget. The Bridgestone was the noisiest of all the all-season tyres, and the summer tyre didn't fare any better, so there's no major differences in external noise. From a comfort point of view, the Continental, Pirelli and the Bridgestone seemed to be the best of the bunch, though again it was very, very, very close. Both of us doing the comfort test also agreed that the Bridgestone was the firmest of the group. The rolling resistance, or the energy use of the tyres, will affect how much petrol your car uses. Here the Michelin Cross Climate 2 had a big advantage, with the Pirelli SF3 also performing very well. The Bridgestone and Bridgestone were the worst of the all-season tyres, 16 and 24% behind the best respectively. With a tyre accounting for around a fifth of a car's overall energy use, that 24% could add up at the pumps, and it would be particularly important on an electric vehicle where a tyre makes up around a quarter of the overall energy use. So, the final results. In last place is the Grenlander Greenwing AS. It was good on the snow, the very best on ice, and very quiet, but that's where the positives end. It had awful grip in the dry, really awful grip in the wet, 45% worse than the best, awful aquaplaning resistance, poor refinement, and a high rolling resistance. It is an all-season tyre, but only by name. It only works in the most extreme parts of winter, which kind of confirms my suspicion that it's basically just a single soft winter compound from a budget manufacturer. They've tried sticking some all-season sidewall plates on and an all-season tread pattern just to sell more tyres. It does not work as an all-season tyre. Don't do it. Then we have the Bridgestone Quatrac Pro Plus. As always, this tyre excelled in the wet and was pretty good in the dry. Its snow performance wasn't the best, but it was still miles better than the summer tyre, which is what we want from an all-season tyre, especially if you live in a mild climate. I'd like to see a bit more dry braking, but otherwise a good tyre from the Dutch company. Remember, this is a mid-range tyre in a test dominated by the biggest and best manufacturers in the world, so I think it did very well. Next up, in what has become my first ever three-way tie for second place, is the Bridgestone Turenza All-Season 6, Continental All-Season Contact 2 and Michelin Cross Climate 2. It's pretty astounding that they've ended up on a nearly identical overall score after 18 different tests across 4 different test tracks in 2 different countries. It's incredible. And while they have tied on points, they do have their own way of getting there, which I'll try to explain. The Bridgestone Trenza All Season 6 is the tyre you'd fit of the 3 if you live in a mild climate, as it was the best in the dry, a whisker off the best in the wet, and of all the tyres it felt the closest to summer around the dry handling lap. Its drawbacks, well, it was very average in the snow, but better than a summer tyre, had a firmer ride than the other tyres and a high rolling resistance. In an almost polar opposite performance to the Bridgestone, the Michelin Cross Climate 2 is the tyre you'd fit if you're in a climate that gets a lot of snow but you just want an all-season tyre, as it was the best tyre overall in the snow and had the lowest noise and the lowest rolling resistance, which is an impressive trio of things. While its dry braking was also very good, it did lack grip in the wet. I am looking forward to the next version of the tyre improving this. And the final second place tyre is the Continental All Season Contact 2, which was the tyre that tried to do everything well. This does mean it doesn't jump out in any one particular area, but the benefit of that is it doesn't really have any major drawbacks either. It finished either 2nd or 3rd place overall in nearly every single test, which is mighty impressive. I think all season tyres should be balanced by their nature. They have to work in all seasons and all conditions, and the Continental does that very, very well. I can highly recommend any of the 3 second places. Decide which personality you want based on the information I've given you and the data, and you'll be happy with your choice. They're all great tyres. But there is one more tyre, and it is the clear winner of this test. It is the Pirelli Citurato All Season SF3. Pirelli have been rapidly evolving their aftermarket line of tyres recently, and the SF series has been through multiple iterations to get to this point, and it's been worth it. The tyre was joint best in the dry, the best in the wet, the 2nd best overall in the snow, good on ice, comfortable, and had the 2nd best rolling resistance. It literally did everything well. Massively impressive tyre. I am super happy Pirelli have finally won a test of mine, mostly because you can finally stop calling me a Pirelli hater in the comments. They've done it. My winter test will be out in a few weeks, and later this year I will be publishing my deep dive into the all-season versus winter versus summer data I've got from all this testing, so make sure you're subscribed and hit that bell icon. Finally, go review your tyres at Tyre Reviews. It really does help me out. Any questions, please ask below, and as always, safe motoring.